Hey, what's up YouTubers, and welcome back to another Todd E. Walnuts video. Today I will be doing a fan retrospective of the career of Ib Melchior, who was a Danish-American novelist, writer, producer, director, and screenwriter. He did most of his work with American International Pictures, which was founded in 1954 and was defunct in 1980. It was a Los Angeles-based company that was ran by James Nicholson and Samuel Arkoff. Mr. Melchior served in the U.S. Army in the Counterintelligence Division, and he was awarded a Bronze Star in World War II. And he passed away in 2015 at the age of 97 in Los Angeles, California. Ib Melchior's first film was called The Angry Red Planet, which came out in 1959, and it was directed by Melchior, and it was co-screenwritten by Melchior and a frequent collaborator, Sid Pink. They worked on a few films together. The film was filmed in 9 days on a budget of $200,000, which is not much even back in 1959. A lot of that money, I think they said like $50,000 of that $200,000 was used in post-production to try to get the picture looking clean and crisp back then. It had a cool monster. As you can see, it's kind of like a rat, bat, crab creature. There was some pretty good special effects in the film. It had a city that floated on water. There was a couple of different creatures. And it was about a crew of 4 astronauts who landed on Mars, and they were going to try to map it off and see if there was any living organisms, see if they can bring back any samples to Earth. And they encountered a lot more than they expected. Without giving too many spoilers, 2 of the astronauts survive, and when they get back to Earth, one astronaut has amnesia and has to go under some kind of like a treatment to try to get her to remember what happened. And the captain had some kind of a virus that he got on Mars. It was kind of like a slime that was eating away at his skin, and they couldn't figure out how to cure him. All in all, for a 1959 film, I thought the special effects were really good. They used a weird technique when they landed on Mars. Everything had a red tint to it, almost like you were looking through red glasses as you're watching. But as far as like, for a B movie, a drive-in style movie, I thought this was a fun watch. I enjoyed it. I give it about a 6 out of 10 for The Angry Red Planet. The second film that Ib Melchior worked on was called Reptil Ekeus. Here you can see that I have a twin billing from Scream Factory. And it's a pretty cool addition. I like this movie. This was directed by Sid Pink, and the screenplay was written by Ib Melchior. So this is another Pink-Melchior collaboration. There's a few of them. This one was filmed in Denmark, and it was Denmark's first and only large monster movie to this date. In 2001, Sidney Pink, the director of the film, wanted to do a remake after he saw the Godzilla 1998 remake, the one with Matthew Broderick, because he thought he wanted to cash in on the success of a large monster movie, even though Godzilla 1998 was pretty much panned by a lot of critics, and it barely made its money back. It was not a success by any means. Pink wanted to redo his movie, Reptil Ekeus, but he ended up passing away in 2002, a year after he was starting to kind of plan. They were in the early stages of pre-production, and he passed away, and then it was kind of scrapped. They never went back and remade the movie. There was a pretty funny scene in this movie. The special effects are pretty bad in this movie, to be honest. And there's a scene where the monster, Reptil Ekeus, reaches into a farmhouse when a family's eating, and he eats the father. He grabs the father in his mouth and he swallows the father. But there was like a blue glow around him. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It was very bizarre. It was hard to tell if it was an animated man or how they kind of spliced that footage together, but it was pretty funny. I don't think it was meant to be funny. It wasn't intentionally funny, but it was definitely funny. And in 1961, after Ib Melchior and Sid Pink released this movie, They had plans to make it in a comic book series, but I think it failed pretty miserably. It only lasted 2 issues, if I remember right. I was reading about that, and I think after the 2 issues it failed, it wasn't selling. They renamed the monster and added some kind of different features to the monster, and I think it went up to 8 issues, and then they canceled it again. So I would give this movie about a 4 out of 10. The acting was pretty bad. Special effects were pretty bad. But this is one of those movies where it's so bad it's good type of a movie. It's definitely worth a watch. I don't know when I would ever revisit this one again, but I'm glad to have this in the collection. And that's the second movie that Ib Melchior worked on. The third movie that Sid Pink and Ib Melchior collaborated on was called Journey to the Seventh Planet. And this came out in 1961. And Ib Melchior wrote the screenplay, and Sid Pink directed the film. And the movie takes place in 2001. And if you can believe this, I caught this when I was watching, because they show kind of a calendar and a dial on the spaceship. It takes place on September 10th, 2001, which is one day before 9/11, and that was pretty creepy. The seventh planet is Uranus, or they call it Uranus in this movie. According to the narration in the beginning of this film, space travel has been, the scientists and astronauts have been mapping the different planets, and they're all the way up now to the seventh planet, which is Uranus, however you want to pronounce it. And so they send a team of astronauts to the planet, and they want them to kind of map it out and see if there's any living organisms, if they can gather anything to bring back to Earth so they can do further testing. There's some pretty cool monsters in this movie. It's another Danish film. It was filmed in Denmark. And during post-production, just before they were about to release this, American International Pictures put a halt to it, because they viewed the movie and they thought that the special effects and some of the dialogue, some of the background noises, stuff like that, they were very disappointed. They thought it was very shoddy. So they had to kind of make some corrections to the soundtrack, and they removed some of the footage that they thought was not going to make it in the American audience. So they reshot some of the footage here in the U.S., and then they released it in 1961, and it was kind of a disappointing box office draw. It wasn't really received very well with critics or with fans going to see the movie. I think this is a movie that would definitely benefit from a remake. I mean, a lot of these would, because these were really low budget films. I would like to see some of these redone in today's technology with the different CGI and the different things like that they can really make these movies look nice. It would be pretty good to see that. There was a cool monster in here. Let's see if I can see it on the back or anything. It was a giant Cyclops monster. And I was reading about the monster in this movie, and they said that they used sound effects from the movie Rodan from 1956 for the monster's roar in this movie. It was pretty cool. They're not really going to give us a good viewing of it. All in all, I thought the movie was pretty good. It was a fun watch. Keep in mind what you're getting into when you watch these. These are B movies. These are drive-in style movies. They're rather short too. I think these are like about, this was only 77 minutes. So I would give this one about a 5 out of 10. I would definitely watch it again. I'm not going to hurry to watch it again, but it's definitely rewatchable. So that is Journey to the Seventh Planet from 1961. So the next film is called The Time Travelers from 1964. And this one was written by and directed by Ib Melchior. He did the screenplay for it as well. And it's about a group of scientists and astronauts who are trying to develop a type of like a television screen that they can view time travel. They can go back in time and view it on a screen, or go back in time or go forward in time, what have you. What they actually end up doing is creating a portal where they can actually step into going back into time or going forward in time. And these astronauts, the movie takes place in 1964, and they end up going forward in time to the year 2071. And they accidentally find out about the portal, and they start going out into the planet, and it's planet Earth. It's pretty barren, and it's been destroyed by war, by nuclear war, and it's just a very barren place. You know, there's mutants running around, there's robots and stuff like that. And well, without giving too much away, I don't want to say too much. They're being hunted by these mutants, but they're also trying to make friends with certain living lives on this planet. I don't want to give it away. And there's also robots too that are trying to help them to get back. You'll have to tune in to see if they do make it back. But a little fun fact, the mutants that played in this movie were part of the Los Angeles Lakers from 1964, so I thought that was a pretty fun little tidbit to add to this. Little side note too, this was written and directed by Ib Melchior, but it was heavily borrowed by Ron Dorn in Journey to the Center of Time from 1967, and it was also borrowed by Irwin Allen to do the Time Tunnel in 1966. And when I say borrow, they flat out stole this man's idea, and instead of confronting these two about stealing his work, he didn't want to rough the waters, according to what I read, because he thought he wouldn't get work in Hollywood anymore if he, raised hell about people stealing his ideas. But I thought that was pretty crappy that those two guys stole his idea. And so this is The Time Travelers, and I would give it about a 5 out of 10. I hope that someday, though, it does get a proper DVD and Blu-ray release, because this is a bootleg. And although the quality wasn't terrible, it could certainly be improved upon. So I would recommend it. 5 out of 10 is not a bad score. Now this next one here is my favorite out of the group. This is a very, very good film, and it's a beautiful release from Criterion. This is Byron Haskin's Robinson Crusoe on Mars. It was directed by Byron Haskin, but it was written by Ib Melchior. He did the screenplay for this one. This movie came out in 1964. Byron Haskin also did a lot of other sci-fi movies. He did War of the Worlds. He did Treasure Island. He did The New Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which was half animation and half live action. Really good series. I have that. Hanna-Barbera put that out. He did some episodes on The Outer Limits. He also did a couple movies called From the Earth to the Moon and Conquest of Space. So this was right up his alley to do a movie like this, and it's a very, very good movie. This little monkey here, her name was Mona. She was a great part of the movie. It's about there's a tandem of astronauts who are supposed to go down to Mars again, and they're supposed to see if they can find anything worth bringing back to Earth, and see if they can find any minerals or living organisms. But when they're approaching Mars, they start to run out of fuel, and their spaceship kind of gets pulled out of orbit because of gravity. And one of them bails, and he says, Adam West was in this. He was the other astronaut. He wasn't in the movie very long. That's not really a spoiler, because he's only in the movie for a few minutes. Adam West was the remaining astronaut. He was going to kind of, I guess, park the spaceship, and then they were going to meet up once, everything kind of calmed down. But unfortunately, Adam West crashes the ship, so that leaves the other astronaut stranded on Mars with just the monkey. And he barely has any air to breathe, so he has to find out a way to breathe the air on Mars. He has to find a way to get food and water. It's really cool how this movie kind of progresses as an adventure, and it's the typical Robinson Crusoe type story. I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, it had a very poor box office performance. It had lackluster distribution, but it really gained a lot of followers in kind of a cult status years later. A lot of people love this movie now. Byron Haskin used set pieces from War of the Worlds, which he also directed. I thought that was pretty cool, pretty funny to hear that. The alien spaceship that's in this movie was also in War of the Worlds, and they used some of the same landscape because it was filmed in Death Valley, California, to give it kind of that Mars atmosphere type feel to it. They planned to do a sequel and it was going to be called Robinson Crusoe in the Invisible Galaxy, but due to the poor showing for this movie, it was kind of panned and nobody really went to see it. They didn't even bother making a sequel. I would have loved to see a sequel to this that was made back then. I think it would be a hit today. Ib Melchior and Victor London planned a collab script for a show called Columbus of the Stars, which was supposed to be much like the original Star Trek before Star Trek came out. And it had illustrations and everything, and the spaceship looked exactly like the Starship Enterprise. And shortly after Ib Melchior came out with all those plans, Star Trek went into production in 1966. So again, his plans and his thoughts, his project got robbed by somebody else. So technically, Ib Melchior was the first creator of the original Star Trek. I think that's pretty crappy how he got hosed on so many different deals like that. Paul Manty, he was the actor. He was the other actor with Adam West, who was the astronaut. And he had collected items from this movie, from the original movies, from set pieces and different things that he collected over the years. And he had a pretty nice collection from what I hear. And he lost it all. It was destroyed in a house fire. So that's pretty rotten. So Ib Melchior said that this was his most profiled credit. This was his biggest, this was his best project. This was his favorite. And I got to say it was mine too. So from 1964, Robinson Crusoe on Mars, I give this one a 7.5 out of 10, maybe even push it up to 8. It's a very, very good movie. Definitely worth a watch. This next one here is another favorite of mine. This is Planet of the Vampires from 1965. It was directed by Mario Bava, and it was assistant directed by his son, Lamberto Bava, and it was the first time those two collaborated as father and son on a project. The screenplay was written by Ib Melchior. It was filmed in Italy. Some people say that this was the original idea that Ridley Scott stole for Aliens in 1979, although Ridley Scott claims that he had never seen this movie before, which may be true. But watching this and watching Alien, there's really not that much of a similarity to me. I think it's kind of a stretch, so I kind of tend to believe Ridley Scott did not steal the idea from this. Although Carlo Rambaldi did the special effects on this movie and Alien 1979. I guess that's the only similarity between the two, in my opinion. But this movie was beautifully shot. I mean, the colors were beautiful. There was rolling fog. The landscaping was great. It was another low-budget film, and they didn't really have monsters. They kind of had, instead of vampires, they were more like zombies, because when the astronauts died, they were kind of taken over by like an organism, an alien organism, and they took over their bodies. So their thoughts were not their own anymore. Their actions were not their own. They were just kind of like a meat suit for these organisms that were controlling their bodies. So definitely worth a watch. This was put out by Scorpion Releasing. Kino Lorber. This is just, it's a masterpiece, I think. I would give this one about a 6.5 out of 10, but just watching the different colors and the landscaping and the way that they kind of built up the atmosphere for being on this planet, it gives you a feeling of dread when these astronauts are being stalked and having all these different problems trying to get the ship to go back to where they came from. You almost feel for them, and you feel kind of a panic for these astronauts. It's definitely worth a watch, and this is another movie that was put out by American International. Most of these were back in the day, in the 60s. So that is Planet of the Vampires, and like I said, I'll probably give it a 6.5, push it up to a 7 possibly. Okay, so those were the movies that I have that Ib Melchior had anything to do with as far as directing, writing, screenplays, all that stuff. He did a couple other little projects on the side. He did an Outer Limits episode from season 2, and he did an episode called The Premonition that aired on January 9th, 1965. It was written by Melchior and it was directed by Gerd Oswald. And what do you know, it's a sci-fi episode. It's very good. I remember watching this one back in the day. It's about time kind of stands still, and there's a couple whose daughter is about to get hit by a vehicle, and time is moving so slow, and they're trying to figure out how they can, get to the girl and save her before time catches up. It's hard to explain, but it's very good episode. And I guess I will do a recap and then tell you one more little tidbit about Melchior. One movie that Ib Melchior had a huge part in that I don't own. It's a movie that was put out by Shout Factory a few years ago. It's out of print now. It was called Death Race 2000 from 1975, starring Sylvester Stallone. It was produced by Roger Corman. I think that movie's going for like $60 to $80 now. I wish I had it, but I don't. But that short story was written by Ib Melchior. It was called The Racer, and they ended up turning that into that movie. So he gets a credit for that too. And one more thing about him, he had the original idea for Irwin Allen's Lost in Space, but he never received credit. Lost in Space came out in 1965, and Melchior's idea was going to be called Space Family Robinson. He started kind of planning it in 1960, and again, his idea got stolen. So, I mean, this guy had pretty bad luck when it comes to that. People took advantage of him, and he just didn't kind of stand up for himself. But I wanted to make this video about him because I think he's very important to the movie world, especially the sci-fi world. And I wanted to let my fanboy come out and show you guys the movies that I enjoy that he had a part in. So if you are familiar with Ib Melchior, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't know him before this, I hope you learned a little bit about him, and maybe you'll check out some of these movies. But thank you for tuning in. And if you guys made it this far, comment below that you would not mind, let's see, what can we say? You would not mind exploring Uranus. Take care, guys. See you next time.